The Miramichi is a legendary Atlantic salmon river. It rolls through the life of Brad Burns. Brad is first and foremost a businessman who owns a company that sells office products. However, he's written 3 books, the latest a snapshot of fishing and fishing culture on the Miramichi.
Well, thankfully, at least in Canada, Atlantic salmon fishing doesn't have the big enemy that a lot of sport fishing has in America, in that the fish is already a sport fish. So there's no commercial fishery in Atlantic Canada for the salmon. But and these rivers really are quite pristine.
Here, through rights granted by the king centuries ago, the landowner owns halfway out across the river, and you can't fish without landowner's permission. Brad bought both sides of the river in front of his camp. In short, access to fishing is very different here.
The king gave these people a piece of the river and said, that's yours, you can net the fish, to eat the fish, you can, it was to bring people to the land. And so that comes down to today.
A trip to his Miramichi camp gives one a very relaxed look at an intense and opinionated man. On the walls are pictures of memorable fish and memorable fishing friends. And the front porch is a great place to hear stories of legendary locals, like guide Willie Baxo, whose ashes are right on the property, and Arnold Campbell, whose family was given this land by the king.
Arnold Campbell, who grew up here, passed away a couple of years ago, lived just down here. And he sort of waved his hand here and he said, there wasn't a tree around here when I was a boy, he said. We had sheep, they ate it all right down to the bottom. He said, sheep are good for that. Yeah. And he lived for 2 years up in the Arctic as a trapper. Yeah. And I said to him, I said, how'd you learn how to do that, how to survive? You know, he talked about living in these little tilts and making a huge pot of tea in the evening so you would wake up during the night to urinate, because otherwise you'd freeze to death if you didn't wake up during the night.
While storytelling is part of the fun of a visit to camp,
thank you, gentlemen, for coming up.
A lot of conservation strategy has been conceived right here. Brad is on the board of the Miramichi Salmon Association, the U.S. Council of the Atlantic Salmon Federation, and was a founder and is president of Stripers Forever, an online organization dedicated to ending the commercial fishing of striped bass and making it only a game fish. It started when a commercial fishing group in Rhode Island appeared to be shortening the recreational striper season, which would have adversely affected the fishing in Maine.
I heard about that and I thought, oh my God. And I called up the president of this conservation group in Rhode Island that represented many of the recreational anglers there, and I said, what are you doing about this? Can you stop this? He said, oh, Brad, he said, it's so bad. He said, no one wants this. We think it's terrible, but we're afraid if we don't give them this, that it'll be worse. I said, that's just like feeding the crocodile the arm. You know, it'll be back for the rest of you. You got to go down swinging.
When email was in its infancy, Burns and crew rallied thousands of fishermen to bring the issue to the attention of the governor of Rhode Island.
Turns out he was a recreational fisherman.
All right.
And had like a summer home on the Cape or whatever. And they had a big public hearing, and through email we got so many people to go to this hearing that the commercial fishermen didn't even dare to speak at it. And the governor's representative told a friend of mine who was on the recreational representative on the commission. He said, I don't know how it'll go tonight, but the governor's told me it doesn't matter. This is not going to happen.
His group showed that recreational fishing for stripers was more valuable than commercial fishing.
We showed that commercial fishery was worth about 1% of the recreational fishery in economic terms. There was no comparison, but virtually all of the management decisions were made to accommodate commercial interest.
Those decisions caused a collapse of what was becoming a magnificent fishing resource.
And it was gangbusters for a while, and there were new heroes in the sport and fly shops and reel manufacturers. And one of the top U.S. rod manufacturers told me that during the height of the fly rod fishery for striped bass, something like 60% of his sales, and this is a company that traditionally made trout and salmon rods, 60% of his sales came from salt water. It's back to less than 10% now.
Brad lives on a river in Falmouth with his wife June. They have 3 grown children and 3 grandchildren. And when he's not fishing, he maintains his Brad Burns Fishing webpage and blog. When you look at his life, you have to say that a river runs through it. It's a river that flows with energy, ideas, and a passion for fishing.